Israel says that its troops have entered southern Gaza's largest city. The military says its forces have now reached the heart of Khan Younis and have the city surrounded, following what it describes as the most intense day of fighting so far. Israel says it has expanded its offensive into southern Gaza to eliminate Hamas, which is classified as a terrorist group by many countries. Speaking on Tuesday night, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said his country's forces have so far killed around half of Hamas commanders in the Gaza Strip.
Our fighters are expanding the ground operation against Hamas in every place in the Strip, including the south. Tonight, we operated there with massive force. The earth shook in Khan Younis. The earth shook in Jabalia. We besieged both of them. There is no place beyond our reach. We took control of the General Security Command of Hamas. Our brave soldiers are fighting powerfully against the killers. They are conducting close-quarters battles. They are eliminating terrorists around the clock. And we have the upper hand in every battle.
Meanwhile, the World Health Organization says that the security situation in Gaza is getting worse by the hour. As Israeli troops storm Khan Younis in pursuit of Hamas, there's little hope for the hundreds of thousands of Palestinian civilians caught up in the crossfire.
Tent cities are now a common sight in Khan Younis. Many Palestinians set up camp in the city after fleeing Israeli airstrikes in northern Gaza. But being here hasn't been safe either, and it's getting worse. It's even difficult for people to speak safely to reporters. And the dead are piling up outside the morgues.
Oh God, all the Arab world is looking on and cannot stop the bloodshed. What have they done? Why are they being killed? What crime did they commit to die this death?
Israel's military has released footage that it says shows its fighters pushing deeper into southern Gaza.
60 days since the beginning of the war, our forces are surrounding Khan Younis in southern Gaza. We are operating with professionalism, clearing the population ahead of time from the combat areas.
Gazans have been told to move further south to Rafah. What awaits them there is more tent cities and a long queue to get drinking water.
We're talking about the only desalination plant in Rafah that is providing inhabitants with clean water. It's powered by solar energy, and we're in winter, so if that stops, we will not be able to provide people with any water.
The United Nations says more than 80% of Gaza's population have been driven from their homes, and space on this small coastal strip is running out. Many simply don't know where they can find refuge.
And joining me now for more is Marina, a military analyst and research fellow at the Defence Studies Department at King's College London. Welcome, Marina. Israeli forces said yesterday they've been engaged in their heaviest day of fighting since the start of the military operation in Gaza. Is this a new phase of Israel's military operation that we're seeing here?
Good morning, Anya. Yes, it is a new phase. After the ceasefire, or after the end of the ceasefire, the military operation had to be recalibrated, and now it seems like the northern parts of Gaza City is under control and cleared. So this new phase, even more destructive than the previous one, is about one of the strongholds of Hamas, according to the Israeli side, which is Khan Younis. And so the operation here is very similar to what we've seen with the Gaza City, namely the troops are trying to surround and control the area, control all exits to the city.
You say that this is even more destructive than the first phase. we know Israeli forces are now in the heart of Khan Younis. Can you give us a sense of what fighting in such a dense urban area would be like, not to mention the number of civilians who have fled there from the north?
It is an absolute nightmare for any military to fight an urban fight against a force that doesn't wear any insignia. So essentially, you don't know who the enemy is, and you have a lot of civilians, as you correctly stated, there. So the risk of collateral damage of shooting the wrong person is very high. And Israel tried to get the civilians out, but the problem is, of course, where do they go? And so they have now to operate amongst these civilians, going literally house by house, trying to clear it, because Hamas also enjoys a very extensive tunnel network, which is believed to be beneath Khan Younis. And so this is a very important stronghold for Hamas. And this will be very difficult because Hamas will be using the tunnels and is able to surprise the Israeli military at any point. Therefore, the Israeli military is trying to eliminate as many tunnels as possible, but it's not a very precise science in the sense that they're trying to bomb the tunnels on the one hand, on the other hand, they are filling them with liquid explosives. So it's a very cumbersome operation, which carries a very big humanitarian risk.
I mean, speaking of the tunnels, we've been hearing reports that Israel is considering flooding the Hamas tunnels running under Gaza with seawater. I mean, is this something that's likely? And what do we know about the IDF strategy for the coming days going forward?
Well, there are indeed considerations to use seawater to flood the tunnels. Now, the U.S. hasn't clearly positioned itself towards this idea. It's still not clear whether this operation will be conducted or not. On the one hand, you have humanitarian considerations, and we have heard in the report how little drinking water the Palestinians have, and that could further undermine water supply if the IDF were to use this strategy to flood the tunnels. And the other problem is military, because nobody knows the extent of the tunnels and what effect seawater will have on them, whether the strategy will work. So the humanitarian risk is huge, and you don't know if you will get a military advantage from using that. So I assume combat engineers will be busy trying different technologies and how to best literally flat out Hamas and possibly the hostages, because there are also hostages somewhere in those tunnels, about 100 of them. So you are risking killing the hostages, which would, of course, damage Israel's reputation on the international stage. So it is quite a tricky operation. I don't know if they are going to go ahead with it or proceed further with liquid explosives and bombardments.
Marina, thanks so much for that analysis. That's Marina Miron from King's College London.
Thank you so much.
DW's senior international correspondent Fanny Facsar joins me now from Jerusalem. Hi, Fanny. What is the aim of the Israeli troops now that they are in Khan Younis?
The aim is to crush Hamas, to take out Hamas, but especially take out those Hamas officials that are presumed to be behind the terrorist attacks on October 7th. That is the Hamas chief, Mr. Sinwar. He's believed to be in the second largest city of Gaza Strip in Khan Younis. But while this is going on, while Israeli forces are pushing deeper and deeper into the city, encircling it, that also means obviously pushing out people who have been finding refuge there over the past couple of weeks, who have been pushed basically from northern Gaza because they've been told that the south is safe, or at least safer. But that's not the case, apparently, obviously, as we are not just talking about ground forces encircling the city, but also about continued relentless bombardment from air. And this is what makes this entire situation so difficult, because as Israel says, it is doing what it has to do to take revenge on what happened here in Israel on October 7th. It also means a humanitarian consequence, and that in numbers, according to the numbers that we're hearing from Gaza, more than 16,000 people killed so far, civilians. Many among those civilians are children and women. We cannot exactly verify this number, but what we can for sure say that the humanitarian situation is growing disastrous by the hour as this fighting continues.
And there is increasing international pressure on Israel to reduce the number of civilian casualties in Gaza. Do we know if this is having any effect at all on its tactics on the ground?
Well, really, if you look at what's happening there, that people are trying to leave on foot, trying to leave Khan Younis towards the Rafah border, which, by the way, is also not safe. There's been area bombardment there in Rafah as well. So if you just look at what people are going through right now, and for weeks now, really, in fear, in desperation, trying to find a safe shelter, and by safety, I don't only mean a place with a roof on the top of your, above the top of your head, but also access to safe and clean water and food. If you look at that on the ground, you do not actually see any improvement whatsoever. And in fact, the human rights organizations are saying that the only thing that can help right now is a ceasefire. But that's exactly not what we are seeing. We are seeing calls, we're hearing calls by the United States, one of the biggest ally of Israel, saying that Israel, yes, has to defend itself, but it also needs to make sure that it limits the casualties on the ground. But how is that supposed to work? Obviously, as Gaza Strip is being is facing this constant bombardment, that's the big question.
The Israeli Prime Minister has said that the military will have security control over the Gaza Strip long after the war against Hamas ends. Do we know at all what that might look like?
It's really up to anyone's guess what's going to happen once this ground offensive is over, once the fighting is over, because controlling is one thing, governing is another. And even if Israel is succeeding to take out the Hamas fighters, one has to understand that this organization that is being described as a terrorist organization is not only a militant organization, but it also is a social movement. It's completely unclear, really, just after this war, how much Israel is able to win over the hearts of people. And that's going to be very difficult after what's playing out there, the violence and really the bloodshed.
DW Senior International Correspondent Fanny Facsar in Jerusalem. Thanks so much, Fanny.